Well, good afternoon. My name is Brandon Whipp. I'm a farmer from East Central South Dakota. I'm also the co-chair for Commodity Classic this year, and I'm on the committee of farmers that selects these learning centers for you. And so we are very grateful to Netafim for sponsoring this session for us today. If you are interested in getting continuing education credits, you can sign up for those. We've got a sheet for that. Otherwise, there are also evaluation forms that they'll give you on the way out. That really helps us as farmers to, when we're selecting these for next year, to really know how we did. So we appreciate you doing that. But I'm going to kick it over to Kirby Schnorr, and she is going to take it from here. Kirby?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you guys for joining us today. I come from a farming family in the Central Valley of California. I reside now, though, in Fort Worth, Texas. But I will introduce our panelists today. One is on his way. He's finishing up at another session, but he'll be here shortly. So today we're excited to present to you an education learning session that encompasses over 50 years of farming and agronomic expertise with key partners in the agriculture industry. And we have Connor Vern Garrett, who's a farmer and co-owner of Garrett Land and Cattle, a 7,000-acre corn, soybean, wheat multi-generation farm from Arion, Iowa, with 600 head of cow-calf operation and a beef feedlot. Kurt Grimm, CEO of NutriDrip from Hiawatha, Kansas. Jim Edbeach, commercial lead, sustainable solutions with Netafim USA from Van Meter, Iowa. And lastly, Jason Webster, commercial agronomist with precision planting and multi-generational farmer from Kempton, Illinois. Gosh, you guys, and look, you made it. Thank you so much for joining us. But I'm going to start off here, and we'll get this going because I know we're allotted only so much time, and as though 45 minutes seems like a long time, we have a lot to say and discuss up here. So, Connor, I'm going to kick it over to you, and the first question I have for you is, when did you begin partnering with Netafim, and what was the main reason Garrett Land and Cattle installed subsurface drip irrigation on the farm over other irrigation methods?
Yeah, we started with Netafim in 2016. We really have a philosophy of managing intensively. How can we generate more revenue on the assets we already have rather than just looking to expand? How can we do better, whether that takes more labor or time or brain pain? How can we increase our ROI? And so we started to look at irrigation, and really in our hills, we're in western Iowa and on the edge of the less hills, where we have a lot of topographic challenges, a lot of elevation changes, and a pivot just wasn't going to work for us. We don't have those large flat bottoms that those work well on, and between the topography and just the precision of being able to put that water and fertility right down in the root zone, it seemed like Netafim was the way to go for us. Also, with those hills, ditches, and different things, we've got really non-uniform fields. They're all cut up, different shapes and stuff. And the drip works a lot better for that than a pivot, just the way it lays out.
Well, you kind of touched on the next question a little bit, but we'll have you go into it a little bit more. How has drip irrigation impacted your crop and farming operation?
Drip changed everything for us. It first and most obvious, it added yield. It added 60, 80, 100 bushel to the dry land crop. It also added ROI once we had the system paid for. But it really set us on a path that opened a lot of doors for us. We started tissue sampling due to the drip because now we could add fertility in season. And having that with us, we started to understand how the crop grows during the season, how we can spoon feed that nutrition rather than just putting it all up front, and really do a better job to grow higher yields. And that led us to entering in the NCGA competition that we've been a part of every year since 17. And from that, we opened more doors. We started to meet more agronomists, innovative agronomists, working with different people. My dad started a website, extremeag.farm, and he works with partners on that, and everything's gone up from there since we started with Netafim.
With unstable commodity grain prices, how has your SDI system helped raise and stabilize your yield so you can take advantage of market rally opportunities?
Yeah, just knowing on those acres that you've got bushels, you're not going to lose the whole crop. You've got something to play with when say it gets dry in July and the market rallies. This is going to be an uncertain year. Everybody's pretty scared about commodity prices, and I don't expect corn to go to $7 this year. It's what can we do with what we've got? And when we've got that irrigation, we've got those bushels on hand for if we get an opportunity this year.
I think that's a huge topic, obviously, at the convention this year, especially with the way the market is. So what is another way growers can maximize their return on investment, just from your point of view, especially how you have as a grower?
Yeah, I talked about the fertility, just being able to add that many bushels to your crop. But the other things that we look at, we use these acres as research acres. We don't have a ton of drip irrigation, a huge percentage of our acres, and if there's a market rally in July, we're going to wish we had more. But being able to use that as research acres to know that you've got a good crop there and you can experiment with different products and practices to then add those practices across the rest of your farm, that's huge for us. Another thing that we're involved in is some carbon programs. We're involved with Truterra, but there's go walk around the trade show, you'll see lots of opportunities and programs you can get involved in. And the sustainability programs and carbon programs, they're going to reward you for things that you're able to take advantage of with Netafim. Being able to spoon feed that nutrition throughout the season, eliminate passes, eliminate all that up front, being more efficient with your water, these are all types of things that you can get paid for. And like we said, uncertain prices, if you can add that revenue stream, that's a no-brainer this year to me. And Netafim helps you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. When everyone is done speaking with their questions, we hopefully will have enough time at the end to open up for questions to you all if you guys have any. So thank you so much, Connor. Moving on to Kurt. Kurt, how long has NutriDrip partnered with Netafim, and what prompted the need for a new solution?
So we installed our first subsurface drip irrigation system in the fall of 2012. It's when our journey began, and it was an odd-shaped field. We had water for it. We had a large pond that we had captured runoff water in, and the pond already fed a pivot, and we were trying to figure out how to irrigate this other 40-acre odd-shaped field. So that's kind of how we got started. So it was really about finding a solution that allowed us to adapt to our fields and our practices.
What is the greatest benefit to growers of any size when choosing subsurface drip irrigation?
So I think the things that come to mind, and Connor already touched on several of these, is just utilizing your existing assets better. How do we, you look at land prices today, where interest rates where they're at, maybe we can't go out and afford to buy $10,000 or $20,000 an acre land, but can we take land we already have, put a $2,000 or $3,000 an acre investment into that, and get a 20 or 30% increase in our production? So I think just that messaging of taking assets we already have and making them better. And then along the lines, like Connor already mentioned, fertility placement, getting the nutrients in the ground, in the soil, all of those things help with that yield stability. They help with that payback, adding that long-term value to land.
How does crop and soil health and nutrient management impact a grower?
So thinking through the whole system approach of how we do it today. So I look at our dry land acre production. We apply our nitrogen in the fall. It's strip-till anhydrous. We're banding P and K in there, and certainly that program works for dry land. But then if you take a drip irrigation system, and now I have the ability to spoon feed those nutrients multiple times a season. I can put it right in the root zone when I need it. All of the other benefits that come from that, from a soil health, water quality, water savings, increased return on investment, we talk about the 4 R's of nutrient management, and really being able to spoon feed that crop right when it needs those nutrients. We do a lot of work with tissue sampling. Garrett's are doing sap sampling. There's lots of different tools out there to help us understand how to manage that crop better at a higher level, and all of those things lead to increased soil health. All the buzzwords we hear today, it's more sustainable because we can do it right when it needs it.
Yeah, sustainability, right? A large buzzword. Thank you so much, Kurt. Moving on to you, Jason. Can you give an overview of Netafim drip irrigation system at the Precision Planting PTI farm?
Yeah, so our system at the farm, we acquired the PTI farm, and just like you guys as farmers, you buy a new farm, you pick up a new farm, you got to farm it for a year or two and figure out what's wrong with it. And for us, it was water management. It was on 2 sides. I didn't have any drainage tile to get water away when we were too wet. And there's no one in my county that can irrigate. We don't have water underneath us. I don't have an aquifer. And so we were on a mission to fix both of those. As we farmed the farm the first year, we found what we call prairie potholes. And you guys know what those are. It's when it rains, you got water standing and you can't grow a crop. The problem with that is you put a lot of money into it. You bought expensive seed, you bought expensive fertilizer. When the combine rolls though, you've got no crop. And I looked at some of those areas and I said, when it rains, if it's gonna hold water there, let's just make it bigger and make it deeper. And so imagine an 80-acre field and you having a prairie pothole on it. We took 2.5 acres out of the 80-acre field to make the rest of the field better. How did we do that? We dug a farm pond. Now we can put drainage tile in, remove excess water from the farm to basically allow oxygen in the soil profile. But then rather than using the tile to get rid of the water and put it in a river system, we kept it on the farm so we could irrigate. That's where Netafim comes in. We put our drip tape in and we're recycling the rainwater that went through our field tile into the reservoir, and now I'm feeding the crop. I'm feeding it with water, and then fertigation comes along with it. Not only can I give it a drink of water, I can put food in the water. And so this has been an interesting project. It's not only great agronomically because I can increase yield, but it's also environmentally it's a great program. Because think about this. As farmers, has anybody ever come to you and pointed a finger at you and said, you're the reason nitrates are in drinking water? That ever happened to any of you folks? It's happened to me, and I'm quite offended by that. Listen, I've got a system on the farm where we're testing the water we have that we're irrigating with. If I find nitrates potentially in the drinking water, if I screw up, I get nitrates in the water, what am I going to do with it in the system that I have? I'm not letting it go and getting into a river system. What am I doing? I'm recycling it and putting it right through the Netafim drip tape and putting it back to my crop. It's one of the neatest projects we've ever been able to work on. And I had a farmer come to me this past summer and he said, Jason, thanks for inviting me to the farm. Thanks for the tour. I just want to let you know I'm never coming back to your farm again. And I said, well, what, did I say something wrong or what? He said, no, you've got irrigation and I don't, and I'm jealous of you. And I said, listen, you could do it too. I think the project that we did with this prairie pothole, I think every farmer's got these prairie potholes, and I think you can do it too. And right now, and the thing that farmers will say to me is, oh, Jason, that's way too expensive. I can't put that in. Without depreciation right now, our system, we're on about a 10-year payoff. I mean, I put tile in on some farms that don't even have a 10-year payoff. You put the depreciation in on this, and I've got total water management at really, I think, an affordable price. I'm getting it paid for, and right now, right at 10 years. I get rid of excess water when I'm wet. When I'm dry, I bring it back in to irrigate. I'm taking the variability out of farming.
Yeah. Well, you kind of already touched on this with no surface water and no aquifer, but can you maybe dive a little deeper into what challenges you had installing a subsurface drip irrigation system on your farm, and how did you overcome that?
Yeah, the challenge is, I mean, it was no water. I mean, I could have put an irrigation system in, but I needed water to pump through it. That was my biggest challenge. And we thought about putting wells in, and well drillers told me, you're going to get 70 gallon a minute, and we don't know how much water you're even going to have. And so that's when we took a step back. We actually experimented a little bit with our project. We farm right next to Walmart. I don't know how many people farm next to Walmart, but do you know every Walmart supercenter has a retention pond as part of their property? And what do you suppose the retention pond is for? It takes excess water from the parking lot and gets rid of it into this retention pond. And when I saw that, we got this farm, and I said, hey, wait a minute, there's a pond there, there's water in it, I want it. And so I went to Walmart and I said, can I have permission to borrow your water? And that was our first Netafim system, taking that water out of the pond and putting it into the crop. And we said, if this works, we're going to build our man-made system, our large reservoir. And it worked. I mean, we're increasing yield on this thing, making extra dollars, taking the variability out of farming. And the rest is history. It's worked. But water is a key, having access to it. We can make it. We can.
I understand that, being a farmer's daughter from California. Water is a key thing, right? What system or practice has precision planting implemented that has the best return on investment over the past few years, and why?
Oh, yeah, return on investment. That's what we focus on every day at the farm. It's not I mean, yield is a component of return on investment. It's part of the formula, right? But it's all about sustainability. We got to have more money coming into the checking account than we have going out, right? That's sustainability. And when we look at our irrigation and fertigation trials, we generate these top 10 lists that make us the most money on the farm every year. And our irrigation and fertigation with the Netafim system, it's top 3 every year. It's top 3 every year. And so, we talk about this. What can you do on your farm to increase profit? $50 an acre. Let's start there. What can you do to increase $100 an acre? Ladies and gentlemen, this system, when it's in our top 10, this is $200 to $300 an acre. And I don't know where else to generate that.
Yeah. What yields have you been able to accomplish?
What yields? So when we acquired the farm, we were, while we were trying to fix it and understand what was wrong with it, we were running 270, 280 bushel dry land corn. And this past year, for the first time, we were able to have the numbers start with a 4. And I kind of wondered, I said, how can we push yield? I know the world record is 600 and some bushel, but for me in Illinois, I mean, it was growing 200 and some bushel corn. Then it was, in I think 2020, we hit 368. We said, can we actually hit 400? And this past year, we hit 403.7 for the first time. And we're not done yet. We're going to keep going.
Yeah, I know you kind of touched on this, but again, just capitalize on a little bit more. What are a few agronomic benefits of subsurface drip irrigation?
Well, I think it's feeding the crop. We're feeding a crop like we've never done before. And it's totally different than what that I grew up on. With my father and grandfather told me how to feed a crop with dry fertilizer and dry fertilizer only as a broadcast. We don't do any of that anymore. It's a large part of our program. It's a small part, but we come in on the planter, we've got nutrition, but then we come in with the Netafim system, and anytime that water is on, I've got food going through the drip system. So just a little bit a day. I always use the analogy of, how many times do you guys eat during the day? Most of you don't eat just one time during the day, do you? I mean, for us, for me personally, I eat probably 5 times a day. You can make fun of me if you want. But I got to eat multiple times during the day to keep me going and keep me working hard. If you make me eat one time, I'm not going to be as efficient. Why should it be any different with your crop? How many times are we going to feed it? I don't want to feed it just one time, 2 times, 3 times. I want to feed it all the way through the growing season, every day if I have to. We'll find out what we're short on, and we've got that IV system in the Netafim drip. Go after it and attack it and feed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Jason. I'm going to move on to Mr. Jim down there. Jim and I got to run into each other at a hotel in Minnesota, and he's very familiar with the area I grew up in, Chowchilla, California, small town, but it works a lot with the dairy farmers out there. But Jim, let's just kick it off and talk about how has Netafim impacted the future of sustainable agriculture?
So for about the past 9 years, we've been working with subsurface drip irrigation and utilizing manure water to put through the drip. So not only are we able to irrigate with water, but also help growers be able to distribute their manure more uniformly, and then also many times throughout the season, just like Jason was mentioning with conventional fertilizers.
Yeah. What does the future of drip irrigation look like?
So as this business has grown for us, we commercialized it on the West Coast in dairies out there, and now we're in the process of having a commercial solution developed for dairies in the Midwest, swine farms in the Southeast with lagoons, and then our last livestock use, or I guess last 2 livestock uses will be beef feedlots, and then swine barns where the pigs are growing over a pit lagoon underneath the barn. So it's proven to be a little bit more difficult to separate the solids out of the pit barns, but we're getting there. And then also another use actually out in California that we've had a lot of inquiries about is utilizing wash water from a lot of the produce plants that are grown out there when the produce comes in from the field and it's all covered with dirt, and then it gets washed off and cleaned. Well, that's a lot of water. There's many processors that are really interested in being able to utilize drip technology in order to put that out.
Well, thank you guys so much. You might have some questions for each other, or we would like to open it up to the room if you guys have any questions for any of the gentlemen up here. Don't be afraid. Does anybody have any questions?
I've got one for Jason. Jason, maybe tell us a little bit more about how you manage, how do you look at nutrient management when you have a drip system? And Connor, you can be thinking about this too. Like, how do you decide how much to put on up front, what I should put through the irrigation system? How do you look at fertility management when you have that IV there?
Well, nitrogen, I'll start with nitrogen on corn. You know, in the past, we used to have a nitrogen program. It was a split program where we'd put nitrogen on twice. We'd either put ammonia on in the fall, or we'd put a weed and feed on in the spring, and then we'd side dress. And now, that's not what we do. I mean, we basically put into the program where, yes, we'll have a weed and feed program. I'll have a little bit on the planter, small amounts. Well, yes, we'll side dress, but then I'm going to have like 5 to 7 feedings through the drip for nitrogen. And so it's been pretty important for us because we can monitor the crop and say, okay, I don't need to throw all of my dollars into a full total program. I can just keep spoon feeding along. We'll see how things go. We'll continue to tissue test or sap test, figure out where we think we are, how much more do we need, and then we can apply it that way. But it's all through the season, and that's a part of the managed program. Just like a farmer would say, I'm going to put this much on pre-plant, this much side dress. We do that, but there's many more times we can apply during the growing season as a result of this system. Other products, other nutrients are going to be the same way. If we tissue test and find we're short on something, whether it's sulfur, whether it's boron, then I can just kind of add it in. And I haven't been able to do that in other situations. I can do some foliar applications on some of it, but I don't know, in my personal opinion, I think it's easier to feed a crop through the roots than it is through the leaves. It's been a lot more efficient for us, and this system allows us to do that.
You guys speak to equip money and how that can play into your cost. You talk about incentive payback.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's a great question. The question is there equip dollars available, things like that? I'm going to ask the rest of the guys what dollars may be available because we haven't taken any. And it's kind of been a sore subject for me a little bit with our reservoir that we built because you better believe that's a green program, right? I mean, if I get nutrients in my reservoir and I'm keeping it, you know, I'm not letting it, let me go back. My water at my farm, if I let it go out of our reservoir, it goes 1.5 miles down the road to the Vermilion River. Just dumps right into the Vermilion River. Vermilion River meanders around, goes to the Illinois River. Illinois River goes to the Mississippi River. Where does the Mississippi River go? You guys help me. The Gulf of Mexico. Now we know where all this water is going, right? If I'm keeping potential nutrients in that water, not letting it into the river system, and I'm recycling it, boy, I think that's a lot more important than a solar panel or a windmill. And there's lots of dollars that are being thrown into that program. So I'm a little hot and bothered, I guess, with this system because there hasn't been dollars available for this. But we haven't taken any money through EQIP or government programs or anything like that. I'm sure there hopefully is some available, but for the pond that we built, there was none.
Yeah, so I'll speak to what's available today for most producers. For existing flood irrigation, converting that to drip, there's EQIP dollars available. And in some states, converting pivot to drip, so basically there's got to be an efficiency of water use or energy in order to get that cost share dollars. In some states, specifically California and out west, there are dollars for manure systems where there's cost share money available for livestock producers also. That's kind of a separate pot of money.
So to that, what percentage of efficiency can we see from your, say flood or
Yeah, what percentage of efficiency? So we typically, there's a lot of data out there. Flood to drip is going to be 50% or greater efficiency savings. Pivot to drip is a little bit harder to nail down because it's really dependent on evaporation, what your sprinkler package would be on a pivot, but it's going to be probably 10 to 20% depending on what part of the country you're in.
All right, More questions? Yeah?
Kurt, I have a question for you. So, with your experience in being a dealer for us, you've had exposure to a lot of different kinds of acres that you've installed drip systems on, and I guess I'd like your perspective on, do you think if you're considering drip, do you want to put it on your best acres first, or your middle acres, or your worst acres?
Yeah, so quickest payback is always going to be on your lowest producing ground. Take the worst dirt you have, whether that's the light sand or a really heavy clay, something that you really struggle with water management and nutrient management. That's where you're going to get the quickest payback. But I'll tee it up for Connor because you guys didn't have that. Maybe go through like what your dry land yields were before you put in the irrigation, and then where you're at today.
Yeah, for us, really, the only option was to kind of go to our best spots because those are our bottoms: high organic matter, good black dirt, and the thin stuff's on some pretty steep ground that you're not going to get Kurt's plow on. So, yeah, we were running around 200s on our good years. We were up to getting 250s, but we were trying to crack to that next level. And with that drip, we were able to push through to the next level, and the best yield we've posted was 389 a year ago or 2 years ago. And this year we turned in 377 or so for our NCGA yield, but that was all on trial plots, Netafim, good bottom dirt.
Yeah, we have a few more minutes. Got a question right back there.
Hey, Kurt, what about deep tillage?
Yeah, what about deep tillage is the question. So the answer is the drip line is going to be installed somewhere between 10 and 16 inches deep. So it's going to limit the deep tillage. We want that drip line six inches below the deepest tillage pass. One thing we've learned, though, is injecting water in the subsoil in and of itself helps with compaction. In other words, those deep compaction layers now with water being injected underneath and that capillary action going out and up actually helps with the compaction. So the deep tillage isn't as necessary. We've got some guys doing cover crops. That certainly helps as well. So different options, but you kind of got to think about your system management different because deep tillage is definitely going to need to be limited.
I'm strip till, and one of the things we were pondering on when we built the system was how deep are we going to go? We put ours in at 14 inches deep, and with my strip till, I'm generally 8 to 10 inches deep, depending on compaction. With strip till, I'm trying to go deep enough to lift and fracture, get rid of compaction I'm making in the field, but I have to be cognizant of where this drip line's at. So we're going to be watching this. I don't expect any problems. As long as we got it installed at that 14 inches, if I stay at 8 to 10, I should be right there. Strip till is going to be, it's going to allow me to do the tillage. It's going to allow me to do the banding of fertilizer that I want to do. And so it's really not going to affect my program at all, tillage-wise.
All right, we have a question back there.
So the first part of the question was what are the challenges in rocky areas? So we have different thicknesses of drip line, and so when we get into really rocky conditions, we're going to use maybe a little thicker plastic material, but it's made out of high-density polyethylene. So as long as we can get it installed, we deal in some really rocky soils, but we may need to go a little bit thicker if it's a real abrasive rock. Challenges. I can answer that one, but I'll let Connor and Jason. They work with it also.
For challenges, the first couple years, we had some leaks and stuff. I'm not sure if that furrow, you have some rodent chewing, right? Is it a little easier the first couple years maybe that we had some leaks we had to sort out, but we learned to do that. It wasn't fun in the heat, but it was all right. And getting pressure dialed in, getting just systems dialed in where they need to be. I remember Dad had the pressure up too high on one system where he got the numbers crossed and it was popping tape, and me and a buddy would go out and fix it, and then all of a sudden it'd pop a little farther down the line, and we went and fixed it, and it'd pop. But that's human error. That's going to happen with learning a new system, and we've overcome all that, and we don't really have too much trouble anymore.
If we close the trench when we put the the drip tape in. That'll help with air pockets and eliminate a lot of the rodents. If you leave an air pocket in there, that's where the rodents are going to want to go to get water, right? So if you can pack it in, close it good. When we've done that at the farm, I think we had very little problems. We've had some blowouts, whether we hit a rock or whatever else, and it's super easy to change. You just stick your hand down in, you've got the mender, and it doesn't take hardly anything at all. We're using UAVs to fly over and look for the pockets out in the field if we get a blowout, and so we can find it immediately and send somebody out to fix it.
What about elevation changes in your, I don't know what kind of fields you guys have.
So Connor didn't really do it justice to describe his farm, so I'll help a little bit. So if you've ever been to Kelly's farm or watched some of the videos really don't do it justice. You need to go ride in the combine with Connor and Kelly. You put the combine downhill with a full tank of grain and the back tires come off the ground. Just so this is grassback terrace country. The field by the shop, the first one we did, has 80 feet of elevation change within that one field. So we have pressure compensated emitters that compensate the pressure from the top to the bottom, so they're going to keep the water uniformity even no matter where we're at in that rolling topography.
With the elevation, I think as I look at it, I want to put different zones in the field. As we go uphill, that's where I need the water first. And if I keep it all in the same run where the drip is going through the low ground as well, the low ground, I may not need the water. That's where all the water shed during a big rain. So I look at it on the farm. The high ground, I want to maybe zone off and send water to it first and maybe only. Because again, I got to save water. I don't have an aquifer underneath me. I have to save water, be as conservative as I can. So zone it, put it in the high spots first, and then address the low areas.
We have another question.
So you guys spoke to the efficiency of water. I'm curious what you would comment on. Is there an efficiency gain with nutrients if you do the multiple meals that you spoke about, Jason? Could you speak to, is there efficiency gain if I do multiple meals? Certainly there's a risk mitigation that you spoke to, but speak to the efficiency gain of multiple meals of fertility.
Yeah, so at the PTI farm, we look at efficiencies in banding fertilizer, and that's what we're doing here with the drip. And I mean, we're finding right now that 30% to 50% reduction of overall use of nutrients can be effective if we're banding, and banding through Netafim drip or strip-till bar is going to be somewhat similar. So we're still studying this to see where we can go with it. I think not only is the efficiency thing great, but time with this. I mean, even if I like the fact that we can put on less, but I love the fact that I can feed immediately. That's one of the things I really like about this thing. We find out we're short before symptomology shows up. I can put it on fast. Remember the IV thing I talked about? That's what we got going on. It's direct right into the line, and I can fix this thing super fast. So we're going to continue testing, but right now I think at least a 30% efficiency is real.
What's your life expectancy of a system?
So 25 to 30 years is kind of our common number. We have a system in Nebraska that we maintain. We didn't install it that's 38 years old and it's still running. Proper maintenance is key. Water quality is really important. There's two minerals in water that can plug up a drip line. Those are iron and manganese. So there needs to be a water test done, filtration to remove those minerals. So water quality and proper maintenance are really, really important to get a system to last 25 to 30 years.
What's adequate spacing between the lines?
You repeat the question?
What's adequate spacing in between
Adequate
the lines?
spacing. So the range of spacing we typically go with is 30-inch, 40, or 60, depending on soil type, crop row spacing, and the budget. Probably I look back at the systems we put in for Kelly, those were all at 60-inch spacing. And back then, 90% of the systems were 60-inch. Today, probably only 10 to 15% of the systems we do are 60-inch. Most everything's gone to either 40 or even 30-inch spacing.
We're 40-inch spacing on our high yield trials. I do have some 60s, but that's where we lay the tape on the soil surface mainly to show people how it works and how to see the design of it, touch, feel, feel the burn of the fertilizer in the water, things like that. It's only for visibility reasons, but those are every other row, so it'd be on 30-inch rows, that'd be 16 spacing.
Got another
While I
question?
make my way over to him, I have one for you. One of the eye-opening things for me on subsurface drip was a field day in northwest Iowa many years ago where I want to say there were 3 or 4 wells feeding this thing. On altogether, maybe it was making 200 gallons per minute, which is way less than what I'm used to hearing from the pivot guys at 800 to 1,000. What is the bare minimum gallons per minute per acre that you like to see for your systems?
Yeah, 2 gallon per minute per acre is kind of the bottom number we like to see. That particular one is at 1.5 gallon a minute an acre. So 200 gallon a minute feeding 120 acres. He's got really deep black soil. We keep that soil full. We use the soil as a reservoir. So everybody's got a different situation. It's understanding how much water you have, how much water does that soil have, and then what's my crop demand.
What have you guys done for biologicals? Have you guys done any research on any of your farms for copper or for boron or like that? I run boron through my drip system. I do the copper on my 2x2 on my planter. Have you run, is copper, is that an ortho or is that a polyphosphate? And have you done any research to find out what toxicity is? If you can overdo it with copper or, because I run 318 and then through my system, and I've had good luck with it, but I've never tried the copper. Has there been any research done on that?
I don't know that I've got replicated data, but we run a lot of copper sulfate. We'll tissue test, we'll find out if we're low on copper, and usually copper sulfate is where we go to correct that. We also treat some of the water in the reservoir with copper sulfate for weed control, and we're getting some of that as we run that water back through our lift station. But I would much rather put on copper that way than going, say, in furrow on a planter or something like that. This would be my preferred way. So one more advantage for us. Boron's right there too. We're going to put that in. Sulfur, we'll put that in. Yeah, it's part of the program, and it feeds it really nice. Boron, yes, boron. We do feed boron through the system, yeah. Zinc, we put zinc in the past too, early, yeah.
Got a question back there. Making you run over there. Be there shortly.
What's Netafim's position on recycling used tape? Like in my instance, I had a third-party guy who was going to come recycle it. Didn't, it rained, I got all these rolls. Like, are you guys picking them up? Who can I call?
Can I ask you where you're located?
Northern California.
Okay. So in California, as a rule, we have recycling capability. So we have a recycling plant down in Fowler, south of Fresno. And then we recycle that resin and utilize it in some of our products that are focused around more sustainable things. I would suggest if you could call our product information line at 888 Netafim, we can, or I don't know, are you familiar at all with Matt Hardigree, our rep in the area? Get a hold of Matt and see how he can help you on getting it picked up, because we do utilize a lot of recycled material and pick that up, and Andros helps with that as well.
Thank you.
All right, we have a few more minutes if there's any other questions. Yep.
On the last question, we didn't really touch on the biologicals. We've run a lot of micros and boron through the drip, and we've never overdone it. And on biologicals, it's really product dependent to what you have. We've seen some benefits depending on the product, and I'm not sure we've really scratched the surface on using a biostimulant type product to feed carbon down in the soil. The most active area of the soil is the microscopic region around the root hair, the rhizosphere. And if we can pump carbon through that drip line to create another basically rhizosphere and really stimulate the biology of that soil in season, all season long, over the course at a much higher concentration. Like I said, we haven't scratched the surface. I think there's a lot of potential in that area for biologicals through the drip, yeah.
How high do you need your NP and K on your tissue test to be percentage-wise from, say, V8 or 10 all the way to R5 for 400 bushel corn?
Tissue test levels for it's a hard one for us to answer that question. I mean, we're trying to do the tissue testing to figure out where we're going to need to be, and I've got inconclusive results off the tissue test of where it needs to be. Now, I will say this: potassium-wise, we are low potassium. We're 2% base saturation with our soils on K, and we're just too low. I'd love it to be double. And so I look at that and say, okay, how are we going to do this thing? One option would be 0060, dry potash. Blast it on, whether banding it or broadcasting it. I don't want to do that. The salt level's too high. I don't want the chloride. I don't want that. So we're trying to pump potassium through the Netafim drip to overcome some of our challenges that we've developed with using dry fertilizer. We've failed at it. And so now you could call it a Band-Aid approach, but I'm just trying to spoon feed the crop knowing that deficiency is there and get through. And I think it's working rather well. But it's a part of our program. It's not so much tissue test and say, put it on. It is a part of our program. We will reallocate, use less dry fertilizer in the form of potassium, but then we redirect it, reallocate it, and put it right through the drip. So it's part of that recipe, if you will, for the whole season.
Jason, you had talked about being able to put the water to different zones in the field. Is that fairly easy to control? I mean, I didn't even know you could do that. That's pretty easy to control.
Yeah, we've worked with the folks here at NutriDrip and working with them to see how we could do this, but it kind of makes sense, right? I mean, if you've got a high area of the farm, that's where you're going to be droughty first, right? So let's just send water there if we can, put the system in to supply water to it and valve it and go. The lower areas of the farm, I mean, for me, sometimes don't need any water at all because that's where water is just naturally going to fall to those lower areas, and I may not need to irrigate there.
How does it work though that the water doesn't flow out of in the lower areas? How's the water?
If it doesn't flow out.
If your line is going through the low area to then back up to a higher area, how do you control it?
Yeah, so it would have to be zoned based on soil type. So when the system is designed and installed, we would design it based on soil type or topography, which we can do. It adds cost, but we are starting to do some of those where maybe we've got a sand vein or different soil types that are drastically different. In some cases, it makes sense to zone those out so they could be managed water and nutrients completely different.
Okay, thank you.
Got any other questions? We have a few more minutes. About 2.
I've got another question. So, Vern and Jason, about what do you guys see usually your annual applied precipitation through your drip system has been kind of on average?
At first, we were trying to match ET and using moisture probes and looking at that, and we've kind of backed down. What are we at? About a tenth of an inch a day is kind of the goal, depending on precipitation.
It's one of the things I got to get better at. I got too much farmer in me, and when the crop is under stress, I want to hit the button. And what's the button? Turn the pump on and give it a drink. I got to be better at this. So we're trying to bring soil moisture sensors and things like that in to figure out where that water table is at. Because remember, I can't overwater. I don't have the excess water. I have to be conservative as possible. So it's one of my challenges. I got to get better at this thing. Right now, depending on the natural rainfall I get, I'm putting on 4 to 9 inches of water to our corn crop. Soybeans are usually late in the season. It's somewhere around 5, depending on natural rains. But that's one of my challenges. I got to get smarter to figure out where is that moisture line at. And can I shut it off? And it's less cost too at that point, right? It's just ROI thing going to this thing as well. So I got to get better at it. We're working on it hard, and it's one of the things that I'm excited about being better at.
Go ahead.
Absolutely. The question is, are we doing it on beans? Absolutely. Up until this past year, my average yield response with the Netafim system on soybeans has been 23.5 bushel to the acre. I tell people, look at that response. You think I want to farm without Netafim drip on my beans? I don't want to farm without it. It's been awesome.
All right, I think that concludes our session for today. I know you can go visit the Netafim booth downstairs. I want to give it up for these guys, give them a round of applause. Thank you so much for sharing about your operations and about the product.